on Instagram. He went to a car dealership in Puerto Rico, and he was showing the price for a Kia station, an SUV Kia, top of the line, whatever. And the MSRP of that vehicle in Puerto Rico was like $61,000. And he was, appalled about the price of that vehicle in Puerto Rico. And he asked the salesperson, "Hey, why is it so expensive? You can pick this up in on the mainland United States for about $41,000 or something like that." And the salesperson told him because of the shipping, without going into details. Well, I'm going to tell you why everything's more expensive in Puerto Rico. In 1920, the United States passed what's called the Jones Act. The Jones Act is a cabotage law. Cabotage has to do with the trade that goes on in the coastal areas. So what that law says is that any trade that's done by shipping between ports owned by the United States has to be done with U.S. merchant marine vessels, and that those vessels have to be owned and crewed by U.S. citizens and residents. And they have to be U.S. flag. How does that affect the price of goods in Puerto Rico and services? Well, let me give you an example. First of all, U.S. merchant marine is by far the most expensive of all merchant marines on the planet. And then, let's say a Puerto Rican person wants to buy a Toyota. Now, Toyotas are being manufactured all over the world. Now they're manufactured in the United States and stuff like that also. But let's say this Toyota is from where all Toyotas used to be manufactured in Japan. So it goes and gets manufactured in Japan. So it gets put on a Japanese vessel, ship. It crosses the Pacific. It goes through the Panama Canal. Then once it hits the Panama Canal, it passes the Panama Canal. It passes into the Caribbean Sea. Now, if logic tells you we're in the Caribbean, the right thing to do would be to get that Japanese ship straight to the port in Puerto Rico, straight to the port, and unload those cars in Puerto Rico, have them go through customs. The United States government has their customs system is in Puerto Rico, in immigration, the whole 9 yards. It's a satellite office of all the border patrol, security, the whole 9 yards. It would make sense to just send that Japanese ship onto the Puerto Rican port, unload the cars there, and distribute it to the dealerships. The cabotage laws, Jones Act, says no. What actually happens is that Japanese ship goes to Jacksonville, Florida. Right? It crosses the Caribbean Sea. It doesn't stop in Puerto Rico because they have to unload. It's a racket. They unload the cars in Jacksonville, Florida, the Japanese ship. Then, from that, once they unload it from the Japanese ship, they take those cars and load them onto U.S. flag merchant marine vessel. Then it goes to Puerto Rico. That adds about up 30 to 40% increase in price in everything that goes in the island. Okay, it's a racket. It's a racket. They've been exploiting Puerto Rican people for way longer than 1920. So that's why stuff is more expensive, even though the per capita annual income in Puerto Rico is significantly lower than the mainland United States. That's the main reason. So it's a captive market. You know, the United States government forced. First of all, they invaded. The United States government invaded Puerto Rico in 1898. It was no liberation from the Spanish government. We already had political autonomy. Remember, the Spaniards invaded in the late 1400s. My ancestors, the European Christian ancestors, they started the European Christian invasion of the Americas in 1492. So there had been other Europeans who had, Nordic people who had visited and established little villages, but they didn't last long before that. But a full-on invasion started in 1492. That's why I laugh when I hear people talk about, we're being invaded by the people from Mexico. Like, the United States used to be Mexico, man. Half of the United States was stolen from Mexico by the United States government at gunpoint. So that's why Hitler used the model, the fascist model. It was his actual heroes, what the United States government did, invade, commit genocide, and the whole shit that the United States white people did. My ancestors did all over this place. So anyways, in 1898, the United States bombed their way in the Spanish-American War, bombed their way into, they took the Philippines, they took Puerto Rico. There's still shells from the ships in the forts in San Juan. You can see them. You can go through. There's a shell that went to the fort at Moro from U.S. bombarding us. So we had already achieved autonomy, political autonomy from Spain by the time the United States invaded Puerto Rico, bombed their way in. So right away, the first measure that they did, the first thing they did was devalue the Puerto Rican coin. We already had currency, Puerto Rican peso. We had it. And first thing they did was devalue by decree, because they said so at gunpoint. It's like, now your money is worth 40% less than it was worth yesterday. That's it, because we say so. And if you don't like it, that's tough. So imagine somebody invades your country and they say, well, now if you have $100,000 in the bank, now it's worth 60. Okay? So people, and then right away they went and lowered even more. They lowered the minimum wage. So people, they impoverished they impoverished our population even worse. So people got desperate, and they said, don't worry, we'll give you loans on your land. Right? It was an agricultural economy. So people, you do what you got to do. You go out there, but by the time, when it's time to come and pay, the economy got so bad after the United States invaded, that people lost their land because they got repossessed by the banks, the U.S. banks and stuff. So then people think, okay, well, now the United States government, you would think, the so-called champions of democracy, no democracy, established a democracy in Puerto Rico. They, for like over 50 years, it was a military dictatorship. So every and they forced course, people trying to speak English and the whole 9 yards. So for decades and decades in Puerto Rico, we didn't have elections. It was just military dictatorships and abuses towards the population, and there were laws that if you get caught flying a Puerto Rican flag, you could get 10 years in prison. In 1937, and of course, there was going to be a movement of people who resisted that. And Puerto Rican patriots fought against U.S. abuses and atrocities because anybody who opposed them, they got incarcerated, tortured, sometimes killed. And then they rallied. We had already, Puerto Rican people, we had already fought, survived, and gotten our independence from another empire, the Spanish Empire. And so we knew how to deal with this before, but this was a more brutal in the sense that they, at least in the beginning, and still today, a more brutal, savage empire, the United States government. So when people got together and they organized against United States government atrocities, and they started the Independentist Party, the Nationalist Party, for to fight for Puerto Rican freedom and protest abuses. They constantly got beat up, tortured, arrested, murdered. And in 1937, there was a demonstration, a peaceful demonstration on a Sunday, I believe it was. I think it was Easter, I believe it was. Either Easter or Good Friday, one of the two. And then in Ponce, the southwest part of the island, one of the major cities, and the insular police that the United States government commissioned to suppress any type of protest or anything that opposed the United States brutal military dictatorship in Puerto Rico. There's a succession of military dictators. That military police opened fire on that crowd. They were all unarmed, women, children. They killed 17 people. There were 2 cops that got killed too by their own people because they just sprayed bullets. There were over 200 casualties. People that, on top of the 19 that got killed, there were over 200 people that were injured by the bullets. There was a rain of bullets. The vast majority of the people who got wounded and killed were shot through the back, and not one of those people, none of the people who did the shooting, never got brought up charges. Nothing happened. I don't even think they lost their jobs. So that's another one. And then that's not to mention the experiments that Dr. Cornelius Rhodes, the American Mengele, it was a research doctor, Cornelius Rhodes. He openly, even in writing, you hear him, you see him read his letters, how he wrote about Puerto Rican people, called those vermin, rats, the whole 9 yards. He performed cancer experiments on Puerto Rican women, Puerto Rican people, and watched us die, just like Dr. Mengele did with other stuff, So the Nazis did. So they did that to Puerto Rican people, and also there was a massive sterilization campaign because what they wanted to do was it was basically eugenics, genocide of the poor by sterilizing our women. So there was a massive, unbeknownst to Puerto Rican women, they were being sterilized by the United States government through their facilities. And this happened for decades. So you see, there's a pattern here. The first Puerto Rican elected official was Luis Muñoz Marin. He was the son of Muñoz Rivera, which was one of our statesmen, and he was famous, but he had a habit, and the United States clandestine services exploited that, and get him to do whatever he was. He was originally an independentist, but once they got a hold and control of him, it's like, you're gonna do as we say. So he became one of the worst persecutors of Puerto Rican freedom fighters. Our main independentist proponent was Pedro Albizu Campos. Pedro Albizu Campos was a Puerto Rican statesman. He had been he served in the U.S. military. He graduated from Harvard, magna cum laude. His father was a Basque sailor, I believe. He never was in his life. He's from Ponce, from the Southwest Island. He was a genius, and he fought Puerto Rican independence. Literally fought. He took up arms against the United States invading army, and they incarcerated him, and they tortured him with radiation in a federal prison in Atlanta, and they killed. They released him, humanitarian. Because after they had already almost killed him, they released him, and he died. By the time he got out of prison, he was covered in radiation damage. So this is just. And then people say, well, that was a long time ago. Okay, does genocide have a statute of limitations? That was not a long time ago. It's still going on. It's still going on now. The tools that they use to abuse Puerto Rico are the same tools that they used back then. It's still the Jones Act is still effective. We have to pay 30-40% more for everything that we buy. We don't vote. We don't have a say. We're United States citizens, but we don't vote for the presidential election. If you live in Puerto Rico, you don't have a right to vote for the U.S. president. You can vote in your primaries. Like if you vote for primaries, you don't vote, even though we're ruled completely. You don't vote for president for anything. We have zero representation. We have a resident commissioner. She don't do shit. It's just talk shit. Don't do nothing. And then we're the 5th largest consumer of U.S. produced goods on the planet, that little island. 5th. And then U.S. companies get tax exemption, income tax exemption. So Walmart, Home Depot, the rest of the U.S. big stores, when they moved into Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico used to have a vibrant, locally owned economy. When I was a kid, I remember it. All little towns. We got 78 towns, and all those little towns have main streets full of vendors. Everything, you can find everything. Agricultural products, stuff that people did, your services, your everything. You can find anything. But when the big stores moved in, first of all, you can't compete with somebody who right off the bat is just given a gift of tax exemption. Because you don't, if there's a huge corporation comes into your town and says, okay, that big corporation is not going to pay income taxes, like corporate taxes. But you, the small guy, you have to pay up to 33%. And you're from there, man, your entire life. But they greased up the politicians, just like they do here, everywhere. They say, okay, now, so you try to compete with somebody who's got a 33% advantage over you. It's a no-brainer. I opened up a store in Puerto Rico in '05, and it lasted 4 months. A mini market. And then, so if you go now through the main streets in any little town in Puerto Rico, it looked like ghost towns. After Walmart came in, and after the big stores, all the big Home Depots and all hardware stores and the rest of that don't pay taxes, all those little stores they closed. They looked like ghost towns. My hometown looks like a ghost town. Because of that. And then they finagled their way. They didn't like, in Puerto Rico, for example, this is another abuse that Puerto Rican people go through by the U.S. corporations supported by the United States government, is the horrendous worker abuses that they suffer from this corporation. So the probationary period, if you go and work for somebody here in the United States, is usually like 90 days, meaning you can't, if you go work for somebody out here and under certain conditions, if you make it through the 90 days, they're happy with you, you're happy with them, you stay and they give you benefits. And now that's changing, but usually that's the deal. In Puerto Rico, they didn't like the corporations, the Walmarts and the rest of the big U.S. corporations, they didn't like it. The worker rights that we fought hard to obtain. So in Puerto Rico, they have what's called the labor reform. There's nothing labor about it. All it is they bought and paid the politicians just like they do here. And if you go work in Puerto Rico for Walmart, their probationary period is 9 months. 9 months. And at the end of the 9 months, they can just fire you and not give you shit. You don't get health insurance, no benefits, there's nothing, absolutely nothing. They just fire you and rehire you. So not only do they get to not pay any taxes, and sometimes they also get because when you go into the port, you bring something to Puerto Rico, you pay and the tax, shipping tax, to get it in the island. So I think they also get that break from that. So it's pure profit. And then they don't even, the money when you swipe a card, they don't even, that money doesn't even touch Puerto Rican banks, nothing. It goes straight to whoever's processing. So it's basically pillaging. So people say, well, and I hear there's lots of people's like, well, what about whenever you get into a hurricane hits you and stuff, and you get FEMA, okay? You get FEMA, so what? Like any other citizen, you have to get, how do you think businesses are going to operate if the island is destroyed? I mean, really? And not only that, we pay the highest mortgage insurance of all U.S. Citizens. So part of that mortgage insurance pays for, not all, pays some of it for emergency funds. Okay, so if you don't reconstruct when there's a catastrophe, you can't operate. So, it's just like if you have a business, and that's what we are to the United States government and its corporations, we're just cattle from which to draw blood and meat and products. So there's nothing we can do about it. And you don't get automatically signed in register for Medicare or any of that stuff. You sign up for it. It's not like in mainland United States. You get, and also people say, well, what about military service? What about it? We've been to every war before the United States was even formed, because we have Native American blood, and our ancestors lived in the Gautio Peninsula, which is this peninsula, Florida, also called Bimini by my Taino ancestors. So we're from here. We've been here before the Spaniards. We've been here before the English, before the Germans, before everybody else. We were here. Okay? So, and we've been conscripted, forced, just like every other citizen. The latest atrocity committed by the United States government, and it continues every day. Every time you go to Puerto Rico, you're shot for something, you're paying out the ass for something that 30-40% more than the competition. So there were two main governors but the main one, the one that really screwed over the United States screwed over the Puerto Rican people in cahoots with the United States Wall Street vultures, was Luis Fortuño. He was a suave politician, evil motherfucker, fired thousands and thousands of workers, and he issued, I think it was like $35 billion worth of illegal debt. The Puerto Rican Constitution, we have a constitution, says that you cannot issue public debt that does not have a source of payment. He wiped his ass with that law and issued, I think it was like 35 or $37 billion worth of debt, municipal bonds that he could sell. He issued it in conjunction with his buddies from Wall Street, who counseled him on how to, it's like, hey, we can do this, don't worry. They were going to have our back, the United States government. Prior to that, they had passed a law in Congress, the same people, that unless you were a United States state, you could not have the benefit of bankruptcy. Meaning, if Puerto Rico issued debt and they couldn't pay it, since Puerto Rico's not a state, we could not get the benefit of a bankruptcy or a restructuring of the debt. So, move forward, he issues this debt in conjunction with the banks, United States banks. These people bank hard. Now, Moody's, the rating company, the company that rates investments and stocks and shit, they rated this Puerto Rican bond investments. They knew full well it was a fucking racket, but they rated it as A bonds, A level. They have different classifications as, great investments, right? So, the con was in, baby. So the entire, then came Garcia Padilla. Another from the other party. They had two main parties in Puerto Rico, just like here. So he went and issued this debt, and now it was like $72 billion or something like that. Fast forward, when they ran out of money, they couldn't pay it, because what they were doing is they were using these loans, issuing these bonds to service the debt. So they were borrowing money to pay for money they had borrowed already, and to pay for payroll, and their buddies that they were giving contracts to, and the rest of the fucking racket they had going on, just like they do here, So when the shit hits the fan, the bond people say we want our money. So we ain't got no money. So they instead of auditing the debt, which was by law illegal, unconstitutional debt. The United States government, there's a term called odious debt. It's illegal debt. Odious comes from hate, hateful debt. It's shit that's so fucked up to be issued that it shouldn't be collectible. Okay? Just like they did. The Wall Street banks did to Puerto Rico in conjunction with the two governors. Now, nothing happened to these governors. Nothing happened to these banks. The debt was never audited. And the solution of the United States government was to, this was recent, was to appoint non-elected 7-member, I think it was 7 members, 7-member financial control board. Ain't nothing but a bunch of thieves. And they decided the future of Puerto Rican retirement system. So what they did was they stole the money from the Puerto Rican teachers, the Puerto Rican government workers, and for the next 40 years. And then on top of that, they put a 12% sales tax. 12%, 11.5 sales tax forever on the entire Puerto Rican population. They stole my friend. She's been working for the education department for 30 years. They stole her retirement. So all she gets is like $26,000 when she retires, and that's all she's got. And then whatever little she can get from Social Security, because a lot of this people that were we had our own private retirement system. My grandma, she retired as a teacher, 30 years service. Now, and they increased the retirement service years to, instead of 30, they increased it to 40. So now you got to work 40 years to get your retirement as a teacher. It used to be 30, and this board increased it to 40. Same thing with state police, municipal police. So their solution was to install a 7-member dictatorship to steal the retirement of the Puerto Rican people, so they can pay U.S. banks and their Wall Street vultures. It's pillaging. It's what they did. You know, they privatized the electrical company. They were telling just the same shit. If you watch Noam Chomsky, the great philosopher and linguist and social activist, he gives you the steps they use to privatize public corporations. That's what they did with all the services in Puerto Rico. They talk shit, they demonize, they strangle it, they stop funding it so that it collapses and say, see, it's a piece of shit. The government can't do shit. We're going to privatize it. As soon as they privatize it, the services fall apart even worse. They increased the price. There've been like 7 or 8 tariff increases in the electricity in Puerto Rico. The service is horrendous now. Instead of costing $500 to fix something, it costs $5,000 because they bring in personnel from the United States, the continental United States, to fix shit that can be done with a tenth. But they have contracts with this corporation so they can get some money. It's a fix. So imagine having to pay them like 27 cents per kilowatt. And here it's 12 cents, and people are like, so they're basically just pillaging Puerto Rico. If you want to talk shit, you can talk all the shit you want. But please educate yourself about the reality of the atrocities that have been committed against my people. And since day one, 1898, the United States has abused, murdered, stolen, pillaged their way through decades, over 120 years of brutality, brutal colonialism against the Puerto Rican people. People say, why don't you just become a state? Well, I'll leave you with this. First of all, if you had a daughter that was abused, who had a guy who had beaten the shit out of her, raped her, stole from her, took her land, sent her kids and your family members to die, forced to fight in wars that you had nothing to do with, that had killed your cousins because they protested against the atrocities that guy committed against your family. Would you tell your daughter to marry that guy so that he would stop beating her and being a piece of shit to her? Is that the solution? I don't think so, man. So, think about that.